week's episode of Blood Blockade Battlefront was a bare-knuckle brawl cage match between Klaus von Reinhardt and the demonic underlord crime boss, Osmaldo the Mauler. Damn, this episode kicked so much ass. You guys know that I'm an action junkie, so I totally loved this episode. Not only was there just basically a ton of action from Klaus fighting against all of these monsters, giant bug creatures, Frankenstein monsters, and weird crime boss demons. This week's episode also got a little bit more into the whole black and white subplot, which I think is really awesome, especially when you see what gets dropped on us at the very end of this week's episode. So check this one out. It's awesome. But is it just me, or when this episode opened up and the first thing you saw was a hamburger, did anybody get a huge case of deja vu thinking, man, is next week's episode going to start again? Is Nedge going to walk in and a truck is going to hit him? I thought that would be pretty cool. So the story in this week's episode is that Zap Renfro is in debt to Osmaldo the Mauler, this underlord crime boss who owns this massive underground fighting arena known as Eden. And it's where all these like weird demons and monsters from the Alta world come together and they fight, as well as humans. Now, Zap is about to be killed, so he calls Klaus. Klaus comes down to this underground fighting club, and he's forced to fight against all of these creatures. The rules are, it's in a cage, and it has to be a bare-knuckle brawl, which means he can't use any of his special weapons, none of his blood abilities, so it's just him and his mitts. But that's all Klaus needs. He just completely runs a train over every single one of his opponents. The choreography here is amazing. The lighting is really awesome, especially with all the floodlights coming in from the top, from the arena. Just adds a lot of style to this week's episode. Not to mention just all the crazy designs of the monsters that he's pummeling. Little by little, as he's defeating his opponents, Osmaldo the Mauler is getting more intrigued by his opponent and decides to jump in and battle him himself. This is the best part of the episode for a number of reasons. One, the fighting choreography here is great. Klaus actually gets pushed back a little bit, there's a lot of great punches, and then it all ends when it seems like Klaus is going to defeat him when he hits him right in the middle of his face and then his head just explodes. But actually, he's not dead. Inside of him is this weird little creepy guy made of blood who is one of the blood breeds. He just slams right into Klaus, sends him flying into the cage, and that's really it. They cut away from that, and we just assume that everybody escaped and ran away after this. But they now realize that the blood breeds are going to start popping up even more, and that brings us to Black. At the beginning of this week's episode, apparently we learn he has some weird, crazy psychic abilities when he apparently stopped some coffee from getting ready to go on Leo's head, even though it ended up falling on his head anyway, which actually does lead to a pretty funny scene. But at the very end of the episode, he meets up with that one creepy guy by the name of Fent, who's hanging out with all these weird shadow guys, which I'm guessing this is actually this guy's abilities. Like, he can actually create these things, and it's basically just there for his entertainment. But Black just strolls in, and that's when you actually learn that he is one of the 13 kings, one of the elders from the Altar world. They're still trying to keep his whole identity sort of like secret. You know, his name is Black, at least that's what he said, but when they actually show like his main title card when he slicks back his hair Eisen style, is that it says blank. So I'm not really sure what to take from this, but boy am I freaking intrigued. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Blood Blockade Battlefront? Very simple, but incredibly fun episode, which took the style of the series and just ran with it. What I loved most about this episode, and it reminded me a lot of last week's, is that I'm really getting a big Space Dandy vibe from this, and a lot of that is just because of all the background characters, all the weird aliens. They always gotta chime in, they always gotta say something, and they all look different and very distinct, and I think that's really awesome. The action in this week's episode was on point. I especially love how they actually initially built it up when Klaus was originally going to fight against this one human, when suddenly this big bug guy just comes in out of nowhere, looks like a dude from the Chimera Ant King's army, just knocks the guy out, and then they start fighting. And Klaus just destroys all of these guys. He's so amazing. And since it's a bare-knuckle brawl, there really aren't any rules aside from the fact that it is just bare-handed. So he's punching, kicking, slamming people into the frickin' ring. It's great, and it's definitely the biggest highlight of this week's episode, aside from that big final moment where he punches Osmaldo's head off, and you see that weird, creepy blood breed who his overall abilities kind of reminded me of Deldro Brody and Doghammer, just because of the way it was animated. It kind of looked like this like weird flowing blood figure, kind of like Carnage from Spider-Man, and he had like those weird red wings erupt from his back. It was really disturbing, especially the look of it as it was sort of like hanging out of this like completely destroyed body and jaw. It was just some very disturbing and creepy imagery, and just I'm really intrigued to learn a little bit more about the blood breeds and these 13 kings and how this is all going to wrap up, because they only have so many episodes to go. This is supposedly only supposed to be a 12-episode anime series, and there's still, like, a lot of background that I just don't know. Like, I still don't know a lot about any of the main characters of Libra that much, aside from what's on the face value, and I wish there was more time for development, but we're just going to have to wait and see what they're going to do with the rest of the series. All I know is I'm still enjoying the ride right now. It's still an amazingly fun show, and I always look forward to it every week, because this is one of those shows where I can't predict what's going to happen, and that just makes it all the more fun. So, great episode. On the technical side of things, animation was really, really nice and fluid this week, especially during the fight scenes, and when they showed that blood breed at the end, that looked really awesome and creepy. The artwork was also fantastic. The music cues, as always, are really good and very inventive, and almost sometimes sort of clash with the scene, but at the same time, they sort of work. It's a controlled chaos that this series does really well. In fact, that's probably the best way to describe this series. Controlled chaos. It's amazing, it's awesome, and this week's episode gets a 5 out of 5 from me. I loved it, and you should definitely check it out if you've been following the series. I thought it was just a great episode. So, you guys know that I like this one a lot, but what about you guys? Did you like this week's episode of Blood Blockade Battlefront? Did you have a favorite action scene from this week's episode? What's up with that weird blood breed, and what's the deal with Black? What's his overall plan? What is he really leading Leonardo into? Please tell me in the comments section below, and make sure to tell me what you hope to see from the rest of Blood Blockade Battlefront. Thank you guys for watching my review. Make sure to like it and share it with all your friends. Make sure to follow us on social media and to subscribe to the channel. Thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby.